I'm definitely not a Camden child. I'm a Birmingham child. Born in London, but I'm very much raised in Birmingham, so it's not all just about London. My mum called me it. It's my passport. It's my actual name. So I was born 2 years after the uprising, and she says a dream she had, and it was very clear while she was pregnant to call me Soweto, and it's worked out pretty good. So no, I certainly didn't choose it as a way to be cool or anything, but it's led me on particular journeys, you know, and going to South Africa and them being sort of like, hey, wait, Joe, your name is Soweto, but you're from London. Just like, and then the penny drops, they're like, oh, your parents must have been connected to the struggle, at least spiritually and culturally, in a way that connects, I think, all African people across the diaspora. So I'm tremendously grateful to my mother, my parents in particular, for gifting me that name. I grew up in a very artistic household. My father's a playwright, my mother's an actress, and so there was sort of art and music happening around me from as early as I can really remember. Everything from African drumming and dancing and theatre, obviously, to hearing jazz music. But I would say I first got the jazz bug specifically around the age of 13, when I got to see Wynton Marsalis perform in concert, when I got to meet Will Gaines, a legendary tap dancer, rest in peace, and Frank Holder, a percussionist who worked with Joe Harriott back in the 60s. And I just discovered this rich vein of culture that I thought, man, they're kind of cool for old dudes. Like, when I get to be an old dude, I'd like to be like them. And I've found ever since, you know, a really accepting culture that I think is exceptional. That's what makes jazz really special. Well, it's interesting. I think very often in the music industry, it seems that moments happen and people like to represent things as like an explosion of music, as if it just sort of come out of nowhere. But all of the musicians, I think, who are moving and shaking and doing interesting things have come out of a scene, have come out of a furtive ground. So Tomorrow's Warriors is an example of an institution. Musicians such as Jean Toussaint, Courtney Pine, Steve Williamson have had a tremendous influence since I was a child on me. And I think, you know, you point the successes of people like Shabaka Hutchings, Cassie Kanoshi now, Steam Down, these new voices, and you recognize that we're all sort of connected through this lineage. So the thing that makes me reflect on is that the industry sometimes is like, wow, this is exciting. It happened maybe 15 years ago when I first came out along with Amy Winehouse and a few other London jazz musicians, and 15 years before that with Courtney Pine and Steve Williamson. But the community is always there. The community is always going to be evolving, creating and making new music, and we can just hope to have the attention consistently. And I think it makes me reflect that throughout culture in the African diaspora, we tend to you know, meld spoken word, politics, spirituality, dance, movement in ways that are less compartmentalized than we do in Europe. And so I think I like to apply myself with whatever skills or whatever tools I have at my disposal at whatever moment. If I'm at a political rally, I'd like to be able to talk some politics. I like emceeing. I like the fact that I can use words to be really specific about things and yet use notes to be really general and be emotional about things in ways that words can't express. So I'm loath to pick one form of expression. It just makes me reflect that actually maybe we should get back to a time when jazz is part of its social condition, its context. It's not just a thing that we do at jazz festivals. It's something that exists politically in society and relates to everything else that I do. I think there's a lot of discussion about jazz is dead and blues tradition is arcane, and I was lucky enough to go to New Orleans for the first time, believe it or not, last year. And what that experience taught me was that this tradition has always been alive. It's not something that just exists in museums and something that you can archive and freeze frame. It's something that is lived in the people that that create that music, and it's part of a community. So for jazz and blues to be relevant in the future, we need it to resonate with people, with alive human beings who can trace back their lineage and their relationships through generations and carry on that baton of music, but who also are themselves dynamic. And I say that because we're at a point where, of course, jazz and blues are being taught in the academies, and that's fine, but we often have a habit of sterilizing the wider context. So we forget that jazz is dance music, or was dance music in its inception. We forget that there's a spiritual aspect to the music, to both jazz, and we forget, or rather we're embarrassed to talk about social issues to do with race and inequality, that you can't consider what these music's about if you're not discussing the African diaspora, if you're not discussing what it means to have been black in those periods in history in which jazz found its genesis. So yeah, I find it's more relevant than ever, actually. How can we play a music where, no matter what, again, which language you speak or where you come from, that there's a shared common understanding of the lineage, or there should be, and how can we make music collectively improvising? It's a great challenge, considering the rage all around Europe, particularly in Britain and America, seems to be all about division, right? Me and mine, and I'm right wing, I'm left wing, and I'm wing wing. I don't know what people define themselves as now, but it's a useful template to have. Great question. I mean, I think in many instances where English really is a barrier, and I don't speak fluent, Bengali or Russian or something, I think people can connect with the rhythm and the passion in your voice. And I try and emphasize perhaps songs in which I can communicate the energy of a song, even if every single word doesn't come across. And I think people extrapolate interesting, different meaning from performing in that way. But also, I like to freestyle and improvise a lot wherever I'm at. And that allows me to change the tempo and the ways in which I can communicate with an audience. So even where English isn't people's first language, I can take a couple of French words, let's say, maybe even German if I'm feeling really bold, and utiliser.
Check, let's do it like this. Say when I say like a, you say jazz machine, like a, jazz machine, like a, jazz machine. That was pretty nice. I all think that you rapping clean. It's like a, jazz machine, like a, yeah, everything we do, yes, it must be straight in your spleen, cause it's like a, it's not a pop machine or a reggae beat, it's just like a.
I'm working on something, I can tell you what it's called, I think, called The Black Peril. And it's an interesting, right? Yeah, right? It's based on the race riots that happened right across Europe 100 years ago this year. So in 1919, in Chicago, in St. Louis, in the UK, all around Liverpool, Cardiff, Salford, Hull, East London, there were race riots after the First World War in which black demob soldiers, white demob soldiers, workless people, really people without hope, clashed together in the streets. And I'm interested in the collision of cultures, but also the collision of sound. What did music sound like 100 years ago? And I'm going to use ragtime, West Indian folk music, classical music, to tell a story that I think is still resonant today. It's still very contemporary. That at a moment in time when after war people should be coming together and recognizing actually maybe we have common enemies in the elites that send us off to fight ignorant wars on their behalves and don't care. But instead, the poor people end up blaming each other and blaming the immigrants. And we still seem to be seeing that today. But yeah, look out for The Black Peril. It's gonna be great. It's kind of strange to say that, it sounds good. Watch out for The Black Peril. It's coming soon. I think all the commentary I make about the planet and politics and stuff just comes as a result of being a reflective person. I'm not somebody who can just sort of sit by and watch injustice happen in front of me and not say anything about it. And often because it interfaces with me personally, right? I'll be fated here at a wonderful jazz festival like this. And people will, oh, we love you. And then I'll get back to Birmingham or London or even Luxembourg airport maybe and can't get a taxi, or somebody's, oh, he's an immigrant, or, you know, these things happen. So how does an artist respond to that? I can just pretend it didn't happen and just take my paycheck, but that's not the kind of person I am. I like to be provocative, I like to get people thinking. So I maintain my optimism by the fact that I have a platform still to be able to express these things freely, and I'm always meeting kindred spirits, people who agree, plenty of people who disagree, right? But so many who are saying similar things in different ways that it gives me tremendous hope that it's not people that design all of these nefarious inequalities. It's a system, the system that, you know, profits some people to do really well off of evil, and the majority of people to just subsist, not even to live, but to subsist from, you know, what's ultimately a poorly designed system.